Welcome, all you sinners and sodomites, to episode 24 of Bible Stories for Atheists. I'm Josh.
I'm Linz.
And we are your guides to the hardly helpful stories, literally littering the Bible. Mm-hmm. And we get into a whole bunch of stuff in this episode. Well, it's like a few stories, but we get deep into those stories.
Yeah, my brain was working overtime on the questions that Josh couldn't answer.
Yeah, we ended up having a lot of detours, I think.
He tries to, poor guy.
Yeah.
He tries to, estimate what I'm going to ask about ahead of time and do a little extra research on those subjects, but he just never knows what's going to draw my attention. This time,
what she's going to
hyper focus on,
what she's going to ignore, and while she's looking up on her phone, something I talked about 10 minutes ago. We talk about the tribute to Caesar, so whether or not you should pay taxes.
Yep.
Turns out Jesus is in favor of taxes.
And Caesar salads are delicious.
Yeah, we just determined to that as well. What to do at the resurrection. Do we go straight to heaven or do we get resurrected? And also, if you do get resurrected, are you still married?
Right.
Yeah,
all of those questions and more.
We talk about the destruction of the temple,
Again.
Jesus predicting the destruction of the temple,
Again.
And the signs of the end times.
Yep.
Again.
Yeah.
Yep. And then we jump over to John, the book of John,
Yes.
and talk about Lazarus.
Arguably one of the best known and most impressive miracles that Jesus has performed that only occurs in one of the Gospels. Mm-hmm. And turns out might have some inconsistencies and changes and is not as solid of a story as everyone thinks it is.
No, not at all. Especially from the original manuscripts and stuff like that, what the problems are with that. And then we talk about the plot to kill Jesus that comes after that. And then finally John's version of Palm Sunday, which we talked about in last episode as well, the other versions of that. So strap in, strap on for episode 24, Dr. Sheol's. Yeah, so previously on BSFA, we talked about Zacchaeus. Is that what we landed on? Zacchaeus, the tax collector, the short guy that climbed a fig tree to see Jesus.
And therefore is better than everybody else because he could climb a tree.
Yeah, because he wanted to see Jesus. Right. That was it.
Yeah. So he climbed a tree.
And Jesus was like, hey, I'm spending the night with you.
Low standards.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
Is that a short joke? Joke?
It wasn't intended to be, but I'll take it.
Okay, yeah. And then we had the parable of the 10 minas / bags of gold, which is, Jesus getting real, be wise with your money all of a sudden.
Right.
Instead of giving it all away.
Yeah. Not counterintuitive,
Contradictory.
Thank you.
Yes. We also got to Palm Sunday. So what happened to inspire Palm Sunday with the Jesus riding a couple of asses and people waving palm branches at him and stuff.
Yes.
They actually didn't say that they were palm branches in that. Though.
They didn't?
No.
I think they just assumed because that was the foliage.
It was the foliage.
Of the area, maybe?
Maybe. And then finally we got to the fig tree and the money changers.
Yeah.
Your favorite story.
And the reason why, just so everyone is clear as to why this is my favorite story, because I heard it years ago and it was one of the first, the whole concept of this podcast is I don't know much about the Bible.
Yeah.
Right. So when I heard this story years ago, I was like, seriously? He was mad because the fig tree didn't have fruit on it, so he destroyed the fig tree.
I think a lot of people feel that way when they first hear that story.
What a brat.
Yeah.
Figs have a season.
Right. Figs are allowed to be out of season.
Right. And also, like, they're not sentient. So they didn't have anything against Jesus. It's not like they pulled all their fruit in when they knew he was coming by.
The fig trees were Satanists.
Yeah. I mean, you know, they are sexy fruits, right?
I guess. I always just associate them with Fig Newtons, which I don't think is a sexy candy.
No, well, it's not a candy; it's a cookie. But
I mean, technically, it's probably a sandwich.
It's a sandwich cookie.
Yeah.
And I don't even think it's that because it's. I'm gonna get into the nuances of Fig Newtons here. It's enveloped around all sides except for the end, so that's not a sandwich. It's more like a roll. A flattened roll.
This is going to be the next hour, folks. Let's strap in, strap on for this.
But Fig Newtons are definitely like, I don't think kids think about eating Fig Newtons. Right?
No,
they're like,
I don't think so.
They're like old
unless they
people
go to their
cookies.
grandmas.
Yeah.
I mean, even when I was a kid, it was an old people food.
I mean, we had them at the house to eat because, you know, my stepdad was an old guy.
Yeah.
So those are the cookies we had to eat.
Right.
They're good.
Yeah.
I think. I haven't eaten them in a while.
They taste like figs.
Yeah. Figs are delicious.
Yeah, they're not bad.
Yeah.
They're okay.
I like figs.
You throw a little bread in there. I mean, you can't go wrong.
A little cookie.
I mean, it's like bread. It's a bread. It's
not bread.
It's like a sweeter bread. It's basically
I hope you cut out a good chunk of this conversation because it's so fucking boring.
It's not like it's hard or anything like that.
No,
it's like basically
cookies aren't hard all the time.
Not all the time, but this is like totally a bread. That's like around.
I think we are going to have to agree to disagree.
I think we're going to have to get some Fig Newtons and reassess.
It's more like a cake.
Oh, okay. Isn't a cake a bread, though?
No.
Like when you really think about it.
No, bread has yeast in it.
Does cake not have yeast? I'm saying all this without having any idea how to make any of these things that we talk about.
Did you just ask if cake has yeast in it?
Yeah, I don't know. No,
cake does not have yeast in it.
It seems like it would. It's got bubbles in it. Like where do the bubbles come from? You know, it rises. That's what I mean.
It does.
Like, it rises.
It does have agents within it that rise it, but also there are.
But you never make a dough. You never make a cake dough,
right? And then let it rise.
You have a batter.
Yeah, it rises. It leavens through the baking process.
Right.
It's science, Josh.
It's science.
See,
I was raised to not believe in science.
That's true. So you just thought cake had yeast in it.
Yeah.
Because bubbles.
Because Jesus.
So like pop has yeast in it too then, or?
Yeah, pop is bread, right?
And those bubbles that you blow as a child, that's also bread?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. That's making bread. That's how you make bread.
It all makes sense now.
God, Lindsay, I feel like you never have watched a cooking video.
If anybody knew anything about me, they would know that was a ridiculous statement.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So that's what was previously on BSFA.
Cake.
Yeah.
Is it bread? Tweet us.
At Bible Atheist.
At Bible Atheist and let us know your opinion.
Let's talk about tribute to Caesar.
A tribute to Caesar?
Yes.
The salad?
Yes.
Okay. I will stand up for that tribute.
Right.
It's a delicious salad.
It's a delicious one. Is that the dressingless salad?
Caesar salad?
Yeah, or does Caesar salad have dressing?
It has Caesar dressing on it, babe.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
With the anchovies. But
with anchovies?
Yeah.
Oh, in the dressing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not named after Julius Caesar, named after I think
Little
the guy
Caesars?
who created it, whose last name was Caesar, or like Caesar's Palace and
Caesar Chavez
in Las Vegas or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Caesar Chavez. Yep. Little known fact about Caesar Chavez.
So this is Mark 12, 13 through 17, Luke 20, 20 through 26, and Matthew 22, 15 through 22. Luke's version goes like this. So there's Pharisees and teachers of the law that send spies
Okay.
pretending to be followers of Jesus to catch him saying something that they could use against him, right? We've seen this multiple times by now, like where they're trying to catch him in his words and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Same thing. So they go and ask him if it's right to pay taxes to Caesar.
Okay.
But he does not appreciate their ruse.
I don't appreciate your ruse. Your clever attempt to trick me.
Yeah. So he asked them to show him a denarius, which is a coin.
Yep.
And asks whose image is on it, right? And so they tell him it's Caesar's image, And he says to them, then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God, which is basically the NIV version of the phrase, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, as Tony Stark used that phrase in the first Iron Man movie while handing his award that he just won to a casino employee dressed as Caesar. So,
nice.
Just for a little context.
Thanks. That is good. It's good to apply the Bible to like Marvel for me.
I don't care what the Bible story is. We're going to find a way to tie it back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like the video we saw recently where a church crucified Tony Stark for Easter while singing a mashup of REM's It's the End of the World and Chumbawamba's Tub Thumping.
Fucked up statement you just said.
Yeah. And
so
very true.
Yeah. We watched the video and it was really fucked up.
I'm going to have to tweet that out.
I'm absolutely like not religious at all. Like there's never been a thought in my mind that like I thought any of this was real. And I was still like, that's kind of offensive.
As a Marvel fan, it's offensive.
As a Marvel fan, it's totally offensive. And I am shocked that they haven't been sued yet because it's not the first.
No, they did. They've done multiple Disney properties.
And Disney's very litigious.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they sued a family or they wouldn't let a family like put Spider-Man on their kid's gravestone. I'm surprised that they're letting this church get away with doing these crazy fucked up. Let's explain the Bible to people who can't understand the Bible by reading it.
Right.
Yeah. Sort of plays that they're doing by using pop culture.
Yeah.
But I don't understand how the church as a whole isn't like, can you replace Jesus with Tony Stark?
Yeah, no.
Is that okay?
I mean, Tony Stark was an alcoholic.
Well, he doesn't like talk about straying really far from the source material. Nowhere is he a Jesus figure in the Marvel universe.
No.
Ever.
And then we get this quote, they were unable to trap him in what he said there in public, and astonished by his answer, they became silent. Okay.
Because they didn't expect him to say to give back to Caesar. Is that what they were expecting?
Right. They were to give back to Caesar that which is Caesar's and give to God that which is God.
Right. I feel like if they were actually paying attention to like the shit that he says.
Yeah.
Like I feel like he's made that pretty clear that he's not like anti-government on earth.
Right.
It seems like he's always been the kind of guy that's like, yeah, if it's in the law, then that's what you do.
Yeah. If anything, he's anti-priesthood.
Right.
Right. But not really anti law.
Right.
That he's talked about, really.
Right.
Yeah. And like, he's only really ever talked about Jewish law, which he upholds, but he's never talked, for anything I've seen in there, talked about Roman law.
Right. Well, and why would he? He's not Roman.
No, but they've occupied the area.
Yeah, I know, but it's kind of like being like, okay, so if you moved to Germany and like you were this American being like an expert on German law as an American, and all these Germans are standing around you like, I don't know, buddy. I don't think you know a lot. So, he's basically like, this isn't my jam.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to, if Caesar says you owe him money, I guess that's what is true.
Right. So the big thing with this story too is obviously, there's a lot of Christians out there who try to avoid taxes. Go
and use like the religious stuff. I mean, all churches are tax exempt, right?
Yeah, which is really an interesting thing too. Like, according to this Bible verse, maybe churches shouldn't be tax exempt.
I don't think they should be, but that's a personal opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, pay your taxes. It's for the good of humanity.
Yeah, Jesus says to. So,
Yeah.
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 And then Mark and Matthew's versions, it's Pharisees and Herodians who asked him
from
about
King Herod,
Yeah, so this is from Wikipedia. The Herodians were a sect of Hellenistic Jews mentioned in the New Testament on 2 occasions, blah, blah, blah. According to interpreters, these guys were basically either soldiers of Herod or they were part of a political party who supported Herod, who was the king of Jewish people at that time. In Mark and Matthew's versions, Pharisees and Herodians come asking him about the taxes. They don't send spies or anything like that.
Oh, they're open in what they're doing, basically.
But basically, everything else, it's the same. Marriage at the resurrection.
Okay. Whose resurrection?
The big resurrection. Everyone's resurrection.
Everyone's resurrection?
Yeah, the great resurrection.
Jesus' resurrection?
So this really is something we're gonna have to talk about, is what the resurrection is.
Okay.
Because
there's only 2 resurrections that I know about.
Yeah, but then there's gonna be, in theory, the big resurrection.
Oh, at the end times.
Yeah. So this is something that Catholics actually, last I knew, still believed in.
Yes, and this is why they disagree with cremation.
Jehovah's Witnesses are the same thing.
Because when you get resurrected, you can't get resurrected into a body that's been burned to a crisp.
Yeah.
But then that leads to all kinds of questions well, what if you die in a fire?
Yeah, which I asked my dad about when I was a kid.
And he was like,
well, God will, be able to put the pieces back together.
But he can't do it if it's...
He can't do it if it's cremated. Well, no, you're making more work for him. I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, where it was one of those moments where I was really glad I totally got my dad on that.
Yeah.
And I was 6 or something,
right. Yeah.
But
so if it's on accident, God is willing to put that work in. But if you purposefully make his job harder, the almighty God, then he's just not going to do it.
Yeah. No, fuck you.
All right.
Fuck you.
All right. What if you don't want to be resurrected into the body that you had on earth? Mine sucks. I don't want to go back into this body. Can we take a body of a sinner who's not getting resurrected and put me in their body instead?
Right.
Do you get to choose a different body if you don't want your body anymore?
It's a good question. Unfortunately, the Bible doesn't give us any of those answers. Even though it has all the answers.
All the answers.
So this is Mark 12, 18 through 27, Luke 20, 27 through 40, and Matthew 22, 23 through 33. Mark's version. Sadducees come to Jesus with a question. It specifically calls out that the Sadducees don't believe in the resurrection. So this is a difference between Sadducees and Pharisees.
Mm-hmm.
Pharisees, so these are 2 different kinds of basically priests within Judaism at this time. Sadducees don't believe in the resurrection. They just believe that you go to Sheol, which I think is the right pronunciation for that. It's the Jewish afterlife is the idea behind it. It's an underground place that's dark and everything. And regardless of how well of a life you lived, this is where you go. Sounds like no matter what, everybody goes to hell. But that's just the impression I got from looking into this. So that's what Sadducees believe to Jesus. They say, Moses commanded that if a brother dies and hasn't had a child with his wife, another brother must marry the widow and produce a child. So there's a commandment. If your brother dies.
From Moses.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm a dude.
Yeah.
And I have a brother.
Yeah.
And my brother is married.
Right.
And he dies, but he wasn't able to knock his wife up. It's my duty.
Right.
To sleep with his widow and
marry her.
Oh, what if you're already married?
Well, you could just have another wife.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. And produce an offspring.
Yeah.
And will that be considered his offspring or your offspring?
If I remember correctly, it would be his offspring technically, but I mean, that's just going off of what I remember from Jacob's sons or Judah's sons, whoever it was with Onan and all them. They go, now say there's 7 brothers. one marries a woman, but he dies before having a child. So the next brother marries the woman, but he dies before they have a child. And this keeps going through all the brothers.
Okay.
What are you doing?
I'm looking up Sheol.
Oh.
Sheol. How do you spell it?
I think it's Shoel or it's EOL. I can't remember which.
Sheol. That's how it's pronounced. Sorry. I was just very interested in the idea of like, it's the minute you started talking about it, that's all I could think about is like literally a religion where all you do is go to this underground dark place after you die. Like, why is that something? Why does that sound better? Like, how is that a thing to look forward to?
Yeah, not.
The whole idea of like religion is to give you like peace of mind that after you die, it doesn't just end.
You would think. Yeah.
But this sounds terrible. I would rather just want to live forever at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's worse than just accepting the fact that you're just going to die and be dead.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather just die and go into non-existence than go live in a dark place underground for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. It was like, it's stuck in my head now and I can't stop thinking about it.
It only works like if your religion is based around producing children to grow and not, converts.
Right.
Yeah. But so Pharisees, they believe in the resurrection, and then you're going to come to a paradise earth.
Right.
You'll be resurrected into a paradise earth.
Right.
And Jesus does not say that's not the case. Jesus kind of goes along with this. Anyway.
Okay. So sorry. Back to the many wives.
I'm going to start over to the beginning of this whole thing. So these Sadducees come to Moses.
Sorry, my bad.
Okay.
I threw off the whole thing.
So the Sadducees, they come to Jesus and they say that Moses commanded that if a brother dies and hasn't had a child with his wife, another brother must marry the widow and produce a child.
Yes.
Now, say that there are 7 brothers.
Okay.
One marries a woman but dies before having a child.
Okay.
So the next brother marries the woman, but he dies before they have a child.
Okay.
And this keeps going through all the brothers. So besides the fact that she's obviously killing her husband.
She's definitely killing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one will she be married to at the resurrection is the question that they posed.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Interesting.
Yeah. So Jesus replies, "Are you not in error because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God? When the dead rise, they will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like angels in heaven. Now, about the dead rising, have you not read in the book of Moses, which, by the way, go to episode 10 for an explanation of why Moses did not write anything in the New Testament, in the Old Testament.
Right. He was too busy yelling commands at people.
Well, yeah, and probably didn't exist.
Well, besides that.
Yeah, it probably was just not written by, wasn't written by him. Now, about the dead rising, have you not read in the book of Moses in the account of the burning bush, how God said to him, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but the living. You are badly mistaken. And so, told them, I guess.
Yeah,
Jesus did.
He's not the God of the dead.
Yeah, but the living, which is somehow exemplified by the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob, who were all dead.
Yeah. When Moses said that, they were
when
all
Moses
dead.
said that, yeah. They were
So
all long dead.
Why are we assuming that makes him the God of the living when he was talking about 3 dead guys?
Right. Yeah.
To me, it sounds like he was saying he's God of the dead.
Yeah.
Which is way more metal.
Right. So that's the story to it. So in case you're wondering, at resurrection,
we won't be married anymore?
Nobody will be married.
Good.
Yeah.
Marriages.
Okay. Okay.
No, I mean, like, why would you be married?
Yeah.
After dying and coming back to life? Don't you think that would be too transformative of an event to make you think like, okay, now I need to go find my wife?
Right. Yeah. So he did do a little bit of looking into like when did this concept of you die and go straight to heaven come up, right?
Okay.
And I found on Wikipedia, they have an article called Heaven in Christianity. And they talk about how the first century early Jewish Christians from whom Christianity developed as a Gentile religion, believed that the kingdom of God was coming to earth within their own lifetimes, right? Because, Jesus said that a lot.
Right.
And we're going to get into even more of him saying that today. And they looked forward to a divine future on earth. According to Bart Ehrman, who we've talked about a few times, he's this Christian scholar, or a scholar on Christianity. According to Bart Ehrman, when the kingdom of God did not arrive, Christian beliefs gradually changed into the expectation of an immediate reward in heaven after death, rather than a future divine kingdom on earth. Despite churches continuing to use the major creeds, statements of belief in the coming resurrection day and world to come. So even though the Catholic Church still maintains to this day that there's going to be a resurrection,
right?
This belief that you go to heaven immediately after dying arose and kind of still maintains to this day, even though it doesn't appear that there's biblical standing for it. Although I don't know if maybe later in the New Testament there's
somebody added it.
Yeah, maybe there's some writings in there.
When heaven didn't come to earth,
right?
When the kingdom of God didn't show up on earth, and everyone collectively was like, "Well,
yeah,
maybe that's not what he meant. Maybe he meant that we would all go to the kingdom of God when we died."
Yeah, and when you think about it, it's a much more complicated thing to try and explain to people that, oh yeah, you're going to resurrect, and you're not going to be directly with God. I mean, technically, we're all with God, but we're going to be here on earth, not in heaven.
Right. I mean, it was always my understanding, like in the idea of heaven, like in my head, that you wouldn't be with God anyway.
Oh yeah.
I felt like he was always just this unattainable figure. Like you would be in heaven, but like he's off in his like little God house.
Yeah, his little God house.
His little God house.
Yeah,
doing his God stuff and doesn't want to be bothered.
Right.
And then humans.
He's still working on all those other aliens that he's set up.
Right. Like all of the other worlds.
All the other Jesuses he's set up for them.
The people who aren't dead yet, all of that stuff, like all the new babies and things like that. Helping people get through Ninja Warrior.
Right.
Like things like that.
Yeah, let's go. It's interesting because like I started looking into where the idea of going to heaven came from, and I started finding like some weird theories Christians have about like there's the present heaven. So immediately when you die, you'll go to heaven, but that's not the permanent heaven.
Okay.
Eventually, when the end times come, you'll be resurrected into your body in a paradise earth, and only a few people will stay in
heaven,
like heaven as it is now. And nobody knows where the current heaven is, as if it's got a physical place.
Sure.
In the universe, but
above the clouds.
Yeah. And then there's other people who believe, and this is really firmly held, that there are, I think this was the Orthodox Church, if I remember right, believe that there are multiple levels to heaven.
Right.
And the lowest level is the paradise earth.
Okay.
So, but if you were like an even better Christian, you would be like closer to God.
I see.
So.
I see.
So it's just kind of interesting to see like where all these things came from. And so much of it is not biblical.
No.
It's not even based on the Bible.
Right.
Right. So
it was all just a bunch of people who go watch The Invention of Lying, right?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Like what a perfect explanation of why something like that would have been invented.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I was like this. It's taking us onto a tangent, but I watched the first episode of that Under the Banner of Heaven show with Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, that's about Mormons, yeah?
Yeah, okay. And it's a murder case and everything. But they were talking about Joseph Smith in there. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, like I've never done much research on Mormons or anything like that. Most of what I know comes from that South Park episode where they talked about it.
Or like the musical. The Book of Mormon.
The Book of Mormon, yeah. It's basically all Trey Parker messing. Yeah. Or the Angels in America, which was a miniseries on HBO or Showtime or something like that years ago. But it's interesting because they were saying that Joseph Smith was like 15 when he started like talking about these visions he had and stuff like that to who would become his wife. So she was also around 15 or something. And you kind of got the impression from that show that he was just bullshitting
Yeah.
you know, like to this girl he wanted to get with, you know,
Sure.
and
they founded a major religion based on some bullshit from a 15-year-old, which is funny because like you talk about kids nowadays, like a school shooting happens and kids want better gun control, and all of a sudden the adults are like, kids shouldn't be making decisions, except almost all of your religions are based on the fucking ramblings of children.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, no wonder they have magic underwear.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. What was fascinating to me though is like, you know, the guy was just lying and nobody would question it, you know?
Like,
and
why?
yeah, like it just wasn't really questioned. Like, obviously he's going to be telling the truth, you know, about all this stuff. Like, who would lie about something God told them, you know? And it really reminded me of the invention of lying. But I just started watching that show, so it might not be representative of what actually is portrayed throughout the show. That's just what made me think from it. But anyway, so that was marriage and the resurrection. Matthew's version is practically verbatim. Luke's version is worded differently, but it's basically the same.
So marriage and the resurrection basically is like there's
no marriage after the resurrection. No, no. But what about the present heaven? Will you be married in the present heaven? We need to dig into that.
That sounds complicated.
Yeah. Sounds overly complicated. Sounds like you're just bullshitting at that point. We get to a story where Jesus predicts the destruction of the temple and talks about the signs of the end times. So this is all of Mark 13, Luke 21, 5 through 38, so most of Luke 21, and Matthew 24, the whole chapter. So it's a big thing that he talks about. Mark's version goes like this. Jesus and the disciples are leaving the temple when the disciples say, "Look at these massive stones. What magnificent buildings," is I'm guessing how they would say it. Jesus tells them that not one stone will be left on top of another.
Okay.
They seem to stay completely silent until they get to the Mount of Olives. I'm assuming. Because they just stop talking. And then they get to the Mount of Olives where Peter, James, John, and Andrew ask him privately, when is this going to happen? What are the signs to look for when it's going to happen?
I just pictured the scene in my head, and it was quite comedic because so like they're there and Jesus says this thing.
Yeah.
Like they're like, look at these awesome stones.
Yeah.
A weird thing to point out. And also, I'm pretty sure they've been to that temple a couple times by now.
Yeah. Well, they were leaving the temple too.
Yeah.
So they were inside of it.
Right. So they were just randomly like, it must have been like too quiet.
Yeah.
And one of them was like, "Hey guys, did you see the size of these stones?
Right.
They're huge."
Yeah.
And then Jesus is like, not one of them's going to be on top of the other one.
Yeah.
And they're all just standing there and kind of look at each other like, what?
I guess we're just not going to talk for a while. It really does kind of feel like Jesus just shitting on their day.
I guess this is a sensitive subject. So they're all walking, but they're all thinking.
They're all just kind of giving side glances at Jesus.
Neat. So finally, like, you know, the three more prevalent dudes in their little group there were like, "Jesus, what did you mean by that?
Hey, Sons of Thunder, can you ask him?" What did he
mean by that?
Yeah.
I don't like, why did he even say it? We were just like filling the silence. Why did he even have to say it?
Right.
Also, he has said this before, right? I'm not wrong about this, am I? I'm pretty sure he's mentioned. Wasn't there that whole thing where he flipped some tables?
Yeah.
Wasn't he talking about the ruin of the temple then?
Right.
Is that the same temple? Do you guys know? Are there more than one temple? I don't know anymore.
He's still talking about his body. Is his body made out of stone now? Do we have to eat stones?
Are we all stones? Is he saying that like none of us are ever going to be on top of each other? I don't understand what he means.
Are the stones going to cry out? Anyway, so yeah, they ask him like, what are the signs to look for when this is going to happen? Jesus tells them to watch out for people claiming that they are the second coming, you know, watch out for false prophets and stuff. He says, when you hear of wars or rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places, and famines. These are the beginning of birth pains. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds like he's just stating a bunch of things that have happened and will continue to happen throughout time.
Because of human
nature.
Yeah.
Then we get nature itself.
Yeah. Then we get stuff that we covered actually previously when he was sending out the 12 throughout Israel. So it was stuff like tells them that they're going to be flogged in local councils and synagogues because they're his followers. Mm-hmm. The gospel must be preached to all nations. Don't worry about what to say when you're brought to trial because the Holy Spirit will tell you what to say. Families will turn against each other. Children will have their parents put to death. Everyone will hate you because of me. Like all that kind of really good uplifting stuff.
Yeah, setting them up for expected persecution.
Yeah.
Putting them on the defensive.
Yeah, you can see, like, when you read stuff like this, you can see why, like, people like honestly, the QAnon movement has such a persecution fetish.
Right.
Like, those kinds of people, the far right folks who believe in this stuff, they look at this stuff all the time. Like,
right.
Oh, and it's signs of the end times,
Yeah. Yeah. And of course we're being persecuted because Jesus said we would be.
Right. Yeah. And that's how you know you're doing the right thing.
Right. And he was totally talking about you guys 2,000 years in the future.
Right. Exactly. And then he says this, when you see the abomination that causes desolation standing where it does not belong, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one who is on the housetop go down or enter the house to take anything out. Let no one in the field go back for their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for the pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that this will not take place in winter, because those will be the days of distress, unequaled from the beginning, when God created the world until now, and never to be equaled again. Like, really dramatic.
Yeah. Wait. Okay. So, I mean, there's a lot of
stuff to unpack there. And
let's start at the very first thing.
Yeah.
Because I don't understand what that means.
The abomination that causes desolation.
Yeah.
So this stuff is in, apparently, and I did not do a huge deep dive on this, but this apparently references Antiochus for Epiphanes.
Okay.
Who was like some Roman ruler around, I think it was 160 BCE, somewhere around there. Apparently he abolished the daily sacrifices at the temple, and this was like a whole thing, you know, and I guess there was some, because he's kind of quoting the book of Daniel with this, and there were some prophecies, quote unquote, in the book of Daniel about this, which of course were written after all this stuff happened.
Right.
So that's what that is. It's just a reference to when this desecration of the temple happened, where they said you can't do daily sacrifices. I guess. But again, I didn't do a deep dive on it.
That doesn't make any sense, though.
Yeah. So I think
because
what he's
like an abomination stands where it's not supposed to.
Right.
What does that have to do with stopping sacrifices in temples?
I don't know. I really don't know. I could only go so far on this and try and figure it out. But that's what, like, according to the NIV footnotes, it kind of pointed me to, that's what the reference was about. So
I see.
Yeah. And they're what they were saying was it might be that Jesus was using this other thing that happened at the temple that was like terrible for the temple to talk about, all right, and now it's going to be destroyed.
Right.
So,
I don't know. I feel like you could get real weird and sexy with an abomination that stands where it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Like, you could get real, like, this was an opportunity to get real fucked up.
Yeah.
And they just went like, oh yeah, it means it's this king guy that just stopped doing
daily sacrifices
at the temple.
Yeah.
And that's the abomination that was standing where it shouldn't.
I guess. Yeah. I don't even know.
I'm thinking like, the creepy thing from Pan's Labyrinth with the eyeballs in its hands.
Oh yeah.
Like, that's an abomination.
They should have had a monster.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or like Satan. Right? He is the abomination.
Right.
So like
the Antichrist.
yeah,
something.
why isn't that? And like, where would he stand that he shouldn't be? Well, obviously anywhere on earth.
Yeah.
Or like Satan shouldn't be in the temple.
Mm.
So that would make sense. Like, why isn't it that? That seems where you would go.
I don't know.
0 out of 10 for that story.
Yeah.
Because man, oh man.
Oh, we're not done. We got a little bit ways to go. So blah, blah, blah. False messiahs will try to deceive you. Blah, blah, blah. Don't trust New York game show hosts trying to be president. Truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. So he's making a pretty strong promise there. Then he points out again that only the Father will know when the end times are, not the angels or the Son. Incidentally, the Jehovah's Witnesses for a long time said that the generation that won't pass away was the generation alive during World War II,
which
is kind of an interesting thing. Yeah.
Oh, that was the generation before them, wasn't it? Generation.
No, the World War II folks were considered the greatest generation. So that's what they said, that the end times would come before they all died.
Okay.
World War II folks. They wrote a bunch of articles about it, and they're still waiting on that.
Yeah, because there's still some alive. 1 alive, 2 alive.
I don't know. There's some people still alive from World War II. And it's not just like people who fought in World War II. It's like people alive during
that time.
World War II.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it's become. Is like they keep moving the goalposts.
Right, because obviously that's what Jesus was talking about. But so he says that only God basically will know when the end times is coming.
God the Father. Yeah.
So why do we keep getting predictions on when the end times? Like constantly.
This again, Mark is the earliest gospel. This is the version we're reading from in this case. That was written the earliest, and that was written just after the temple was destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew when it was going to happen because it was after it happened.
Right.
They were writing it as if it was written beforehand.
Yes.
So why
the destruction of the temple is the end time?
That's a question that I want to get to actually with this. My guess is they were probably like thinking, well, why didn't anybody warn us? Right. And he's like, well, he didn't know when it was going to happen.
Right. Yeah. Only God knows. And he didn't want to tell anybody.
Right. Only God the Father.
Right.
You keep saying only God, but it's God the Father.
Oh, who the fuck cares?
I know. Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
I know.
I mean, that's what it comes down to in my head every time.
It's God in 3 persons. They're all God, but there's some things that only one of them knows.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. It's like God has a dissociative identity disorder.
Yeah.
Kind of like Moon Knight.
Tying everything back to the MCU.
And God and Jesus know about each other and like all that stuff, but there's a part of God that like he keeps separate from like he's the primary, so he keeps a bunch of stuff separate from the other ones.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
So that's Mark's version. Luke's version, in this version, they immediately ask when the destruction is going to happen.
Oh, they didn't walk in silence for a while before finally getting up the nuts to
right, exactly.
You ask him.
Yeah.
No, you ask him. I don't want to ask him. I ask him all the time. And last time I asked him, he told me he was going to beat the shit out of me. I don't want to ask him again.
Yeah. Keeps calling us idiots. We get this quote: "You will be betrayed even by parents, brothers and sisters, relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. Everyone will hate you because of me."
Oh, it sounds like he's talking about the Holocaust.
"But not a hair on your head will perish. Stand firm and you will win life." So it seems a little contradictory with itself immediately, where it's like some of you are going to be put to death, but not a hair will perish.
I mean, he could be talking about like you'll die, your body will die, but you won't. You'll still be
resurrected,
alive in the heart of God. I don't know, in heaven.
Yeah, very different wording, but essentially the same points are hit as in Mark's version. There's no talk about only the Father knowing when the end times were, and I was kind of thinking maybe that has something to do with the fact that these were written like Luke's version was like a decade after Mark's.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit more time since the temple. So maybe
people weren't asking the question of why didn't anybody tell us?
Yeah. Why didn't Jesus tell us? But,
right.
Matthew's version, nobody remarks on the buildings. Jesus is just like, hey, this is all going to get destroyed.
That makes more sense to me.
Yeah. And then he does get asked privately by some of the disciples what are going to be the signs of this coming. It was big chunks of it were verbatim with Mark, which was interesting, but there were big chunks that weren't too. So it would be interesting. I imagine there are people out there who have done deep dives on like what exactly was changed and why, trying to figure out why. There is one weird quote here that he was talking about from when he was talking about false messiahs. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there will be vultures that gather.
What does that mean?
Yeah. We get this weird thing we heard before about two women will be grinding when the end times come. Yeah.
Sexy.
Yeah. Grinding with hand mills. Also, there's a short version of the story with the servant who gets drunk when he's put in charge of the master's house. You remember that story? Yep. Yeah, we get a short version of that too. So the question, like you were saying, is, are we talking about the end times here, or are we talking about the destruction of the temple?
Well, are they considering the destruction of the temple the end times?
Right.
Because
we get stuff like this. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. And then also he says, and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So he's talking about the end times, and it's kind of like they're asking about the destruction of the temple, and he's kind of talking about the destruction of the temple, but then he talks about the whole end of the world. And it's as if the writers seem to think that the temple being destroyed is the start of the end of the world. So this is like the early church saying, the temple just got destroyed. The end times are around the corner.
Right.
Join our church.
Right.
And make sure that you're resurrected.
Is it one of the 7 signs?
I don't know. I've never dug that deep. I mean, I have dug that deep, not for a long time.
Yeah.
Of like what like all the Revelation stuff is.
Yeah. But so my source for the 7 signs of the apocalypse come from the movie with Demi Moore.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 7th sign, 1988. I didn't realize it was that old.
Oh yeah.
I thought it was a 90s movie. The 7th sign.
When Ashton Kutcher was probably still in like elementary school.
Oh, Jemmy, you cougar.
Do you have unwanted weeds, plants, and fig trees taking up space in your yard?
Do you have a mountain in an awkward spot?
Try Pray Away, your surefire way to cause any plant to wither and any mountain to move.
With just a few sprays of Pray Away, you'll knock out any fruitless plant for 10 miles, even if it's just not in season.
And did we mention you'll move a fucking mountain?
Josh, what's in Pray Away to give it that oomph? Pesticides? Industrial machinery?
Faith, Linz. It's 10% faith and 100% water.
What if I tried spraying it on my gay friend? Will it cure him of his gaiety?
We did extensive testing for that throughout the 90s, but unfortunately Pray Away will likely just make him find new friends.
Well, nuts.
For only $35.95 per bottle, you can get your garden looking so good that Jesus just might decide not to end the world.
Use promo code BSFA at checkout for 10% more faith in your magic water.
Pray Away is only available in the continental United States, the only country still trying to move mountains with their mind. So we talked about setting aside an episode just for stories from John. You remember?
Yes.
But then I realized that this episode was going to be pretty short, which now looking at the time, probably not. But I realized
can extrapolate with the best of them, Joshua.
Yeah. But I realized that we didn't have much to cover in John.
Oh, okay.
So because John is a relatively short gospel. So here's the story of Lazarus.
Oh, is this okay? So is this story only in John?
Yes.
Okay.
So we've talked about this a couple of times. Lazarus is the story of Lazarus, the Lazarus that gets resurrected.
Right.
That's a story that only appears in the book of John. And even though there's a reference to
Lazarus
a parable that we covered, that had somebody named Lazarus in there, which we talked about, like, I think that was the inspiration for this story.
Okay. And we've talked about his supposed sisters.
Yep.
In other books, yeah?
Yeah, so that was
Mary and Margaret.
Episode 20.
Whatever their names were. Mary and something.
Yeah.
Martha.
In episode 20, there's a story in Luke 10 that talks about Mary and Martha, but no Lazarus.
Right.
Where Mary wanted to just sit at the feet of Jesus and hear him talk. And Martha was like doing all the work and stuff of feeding them and stuff.
And Mary got all the accolades and Martha was shit on.
The story of Lazarus, though, is in John 11, 1 through 44. We're introduced to a sick man named Lazarus from Bethany. And Bethany is the village of Mary and her sister Martha. We're told that this is the Mary who anointed Jesus, even though that hasn't happened yet. I should also point out Bethany it says it's 2 miles from Jerusalem.
Okay.
Right. So it's in that southern area of Judea.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus was in Jerusalem last in the Gospel of John when he was overturning the temple, overturning the money
tables.
Changers, the tables at the
flipping
temple.
Tables.
Yeah, so that was back in John 2.
Okay.
And they, everybody was conspiring to kill him. And so he decided to go to Galilee.
Okay.
Then in the north.
Oh, and now he's come down to Bethany.
Not yet. He's going to, though.
Okay.
So right now he's still in Galilee.
Gotcha.
So the sisters send word to Jesus saying, "Lord, the one you love is sick," which is weird because we've never heard of Lazarus.
Right.
There's no established relationship there.
No.
Whatsoever,
we're just meant to believe that Lazarus is very important in Jesus' life.
Isn't everybody the one Jesus loves?
Without any sort of, no context whatsoever. Yeah. Like, why is he the one? Is he a childhood friend? Like, did Lazarus, beat up some bullies for him?
Right.
Like, did he let him sleep with his sisters? What's going on there?
So Jesus hears about this and says that, quote, "The sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it."
Wait. Say that one more time.
"The sickness will not end in death.
Okay.
No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." So basically, the reason why he's sick is because I'm going to be glorified.
Right. I'm going to make him better. But it doesn't. Right.
No, it doesn't. And it does. It sort of. It
doesn't end.
It doesn't end in death. I guess. It takes a detour
through
at death.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jesus says that, but then he stays in Galilee for 2 more days. And
no rush.
Yeah, no rush.
Fine. I know what's going to happen, and I know the plan. I don't need to hurry.
Doesn't tell us what he does in Galilee for 2 more days.
He's just partying.
He just says that he just stays in Galilee for 2 more days. And then he says to his disciples, time to go back to Judea. They remind him that the last time they were in Judea, people were trying to stone him. And Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." After he said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep because...
Why would they think otherwise?
Yeah.
First of all, we all know that they don't understand metaphor.
Right.
But Jesus can continues to insist upon using metaphor constantly.
And not even like good metaphor.
No. Like, if he was trying to refer to the death as sleep, then you like use a descriptor like eternal.
Right. Yeah. The eternal sleep.
Yeah. Because if your mom came over and was like, "Where's Josh?" And I was like, "Oh, he's sleeping upstairs." And she would be like, "Oh, okay." And then like 2 days later, I'm like, "Oh, he's dead." That's what I meant. She would be real mad.
Yeah. What did you think I meant? A natural sleep?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I meant he was dead upstairs.
Yeah.
Did you not understand that?
Right.
I wondered why you didn't care.
So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I was not there so that you may believe. Because apparently they still don't.
They still don't believe.
Yeah. But let us go to him. Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him.
Wow.
So not a lot of confidence that Jesus is going to make it out alive, which he doesn't really.
Yeah, it's true.
This is the last time he's going to be in Galilee. So Jesus gets to Bethany, just magically transports, and finds that Lazarus has already been in the tomb for 4 days. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she goes out to meet him, but Mary stays home. Martha says to Jesus that if he had been there, that Lazarus wouldn't have died. And then she says, quote, but I know even now that God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus says that her brother will rise again. Martha thinks he's talking about on resurrection day. Jesus says to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. Martha then goes and tells Mary that Jesus wants to talk to her. Mary goes to meet him. She also tells him Lazarus wouldn't have died if he had been there. Getting really judgy. But no, you had to hang out in Galilee for 2 days.
Yeah. Although he's been in there, so like how long?
4 days.
Yeah. How long did it take him to get like the walk? How long was the walk?
Right. And then we get the shortest verse in the Bible, which is John 11:35. It just says, Jesus wept.
Okay.
That's the shortest verse in the Bible.
Like at the temple, Jesus wept. Is that where they went? Not the temple, the tomb.
It's on the way there.
Oh, he wept he's crying as he's walking.
Yeah. Cries when he rides a donkey.
Yeah.
Cries when he's walking.
He's a crier.
Yeah.
That's okay. Sensitive men are fine.
Yeah. They get to the tomb and Jesus tells them to take away the stone. Then we get this quote, but Lord, said Martha,
smell bad.
The sister of the dead man. As if we don't remember that. By this time, there's a bad odor. Yeah. For he has been in there 4 days. Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out with his hands and feet wrapped with straps of linen and a cloth around his face. So a mummy.
Yeah.
Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. So that's the story of Lazarus. That's the story of the resurrection of Lazarus.
So that's it though? You don't get any follow-up? Or
there's a little bit of follow-up, but that's kind of like the next story.
Oh, okay. So. Because I'm very interested in what are the negative effects of somebody having been dead for 4 days and then coming back to life? Like, does it cover?
Besides the odor?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to one of my source materials, which is ridiculous because it's just as made up as the Bible is, but not the Passion of the Christ, the Last Temptation of Christ, right? They do the Lazarus story in the Last Temptation of Christ.
Right.
And when he resurrects him.
Oh, he was weird.
Oh my God. It was like he was full weird.
Yeah.
Like his mind had been placed into a decaying body.
Right.
So he looked real fucked up. And then of course Paul comes and kills him because he's an abomination.
Which is not what happens immediately after this, but
right.
Yeah. And don't forget too that we do have the anointing at Bethany, which is where Mary and her nards uses the perfume and all that, and that's at Lazarus is there and stuff like that. So he's having dinner with them and stuff. You get the impression he's totally back to normal.
Is there a reason why they're using such a heavy perfume?
I don't know. Maybe.
Cover up some death stink?
Yeah.
Perhaps. Why
Right.
she's putting it on Jesus instead of her brother, I'll never know, but maybe it's despair. Maybe it's Jesus's feet just really smelled.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's walking around barefoot everywhere.
Yeah. Worse than the dead guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For an impressive feat, the story is not impressive.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it just could have been such a way better story if they would have just leaned into it more and gotten more into the details. Like, I know that this book is not about the details for everything. Like, it gets into heavy details for shit nobody cares about.
Yeah.
And then stories like this, it's like, yeah, he died, and then Jesus came, and then he wasn't dead anymore. The end.
Yeah.
But like, why was he Jesus's favorite person? Why did Jesus stay 2 days in Galilee instead of coming to save his friend? How was he after he got put back into his body? Where was he? Did he go to heaven? Did Jesus rip him? And we've talked about
him
this.
out of heaven.
Yeah, we talked about this briefly in a previous episode. But like, did Jesus literally rip his soul out of heaven and put it back in his body? Because that's fucked up.
Yeah, but again, we have no biblical reason that we've seen, at least, to think that there is like that you go to heaven after you die.
Right. So but then where was he?
Yeah.
Was like
Sheol.
Like, but does he not talk about it?
Yeah.
Because I feel like anybody that has like
should ask him like
a death experience, like a near death experience, you always hear those assholes talking about shit.
Yeah.
Right. It's always like, there was a light, or I was floating above my body, or some sort of bullshit story that you get from people.
Yeah.
When all of these chemicals dump into their brain because their body thinks they're dying.
Right.
And so you get that, but you don't get that from the guy who supposedly actually has been dead for 4 days.
Yeah.
Like,
does he come back and he's like, Abraham said I need to tell this rich guy's family that they need to start behaving better.
Right.
Like the other story.
Yeah. Or like, there was nothing. Like,
that would be awesome. Like if he had been able to tie that in with that parable, that would have been a cool thing.
So many missed opportunities, I think, with stories like this.
Yeah.
To really obviously they did a good job getting a following. So like, I don't know that they need to have done anything better.
I think Christianity made it. Yeah.
I think they're doing okay with their numbers.
They're getting by.
But oh man, just think of like, if you could just make that story better, how much more engaging you could be.
So I did find out that there's a little bit of confusion around Mary and Martha in this story. There's this really great YouTube channel out there by Andrew Mark Henry called Religion for Breakfast. I really can't recommend this channel enough. Andrew does a lot of these scholarly breakdowns of interesting religious subjects. And it's not just Christianity either. But there's this video that he put out called Was the Gospel of John Changed to Suppress Mary Magdalene? And he interviews in here a New Testament PhD student as of 2019, Elizabeth Schrader, about the manuscripts of this story. The video starts out with Andrew explaining that the Gospels we read are just translations of compilations of a lot of different manuscripts, right? And some of these are like tiny fragments. But the oldest manuscript we have of John, or at least of this story in John, is called Papyrus 66.
Now, the thing about Papyrus 66 is that the scribe is wonky.
The
scribe has made...
That's the technical term.
Yes, very wonky. The scribe has made 450 changes to the text of the Gospel of John. Now, most Christians don't know that the oldest copy that exists of the Gospel of John has had 450 changes made to it, but that's a fact.
Bunch of changes have happened.
450.
450.
But
just in this
great
gospel.
Speaking voice,
She does.
by the way.
Yeah. She does. And that's just in the Gospel of John, right? So, and she says that most of these are pretty minor, but there are a couple places where the scribe added in Martha.
Okay.
I had read somewhere that, sometimes people think that Lazarus' sister, Mary of Bethany, some people think that that's Mary Magdalene. She anoints Jesus, but we're not sure if it's Mary Magdalene. So I'm like, well, let me just check there too. And so I went back to chapter 11 and I see that the name Mary has been crossed out twice in Papyrus 66. And I was like, whoa. And
like physically crossed out by some scribe.
Correct.
Okay.
And we can look at a picture of it if you like. The first time the name, it's Maria in Greek. The first time the name Maria was changed to the name Martha. And it's literally just one letter's difference in Greek. The I, which is an iota, was changed to a theta. So a theta is one letter in Greek. So Maria is changed to Martha. And it's very clear that that's what's happened there. And that, that could be seen as just a scribal mistake, like the scribe got confused. Except that just a couple of verses later, a woman's name has been scratched out very obviously, and it looks really bad in the papyrus. And it is changed to say, Hi Adelphi, the sisters. Not only that, but all the verbs in that verse are changed from singular to plural. And I was like, wait a second. It looks like they're changing Mary into Mary and Martha. And this is the oldest copy we have of the Gospel of John in the Lazarus story.
You really should watch the video because they do have pictures of these manuscripts and you can totally see what she's talking about, that it's been changed. What likely happened is that the person transcribing Papyrus 66 had two other manuscripts in front of them that they were copying from. One had Martha in it and one only had Mary, right? And then they started by copying Mary and then they switched.
Okay.
I believe that Papyrus 66, that this scribe, one of the exemplars had Martha and the other one didn't. And at a certain point, I believe it's in the middle of John 11, verse 5, the scribe makes the decision, you know what? I'm going to copy the version that has Martha because that's the verse. After that verse, everything is stable around Martha for the rest of Papyrus 66. But before that, there's all these problems, and you can see the scribe trying to reconcile them. And in fact, most of these problems from John 11, verse 1 to 5 can be explained as the scribe knowing both versions and trying to find a way to make it work without, but while honoring both exemplars. And it just doesn't work. And so the scribe, I think, gives up in John 11:5 and says, okay, we're going to do the one with Martha.
And then Andrew goes into talking about how we can't really know what the scribe was thinking when they were doing it. Like you can't,
obviously,
you can't figure out what their motivations were. Right. So we shouldn't just assume that they were actually trying to suppress Mary or anything like that. It really could be that they were just trying to have a consistent story. Right. He points out, I think, that scribes would commonly try to add more authority to a story where they could. But like Elizabeth points out, most people are completely unaware that all these changes have happened to the gospel manuscripts over the years. And if this was a real story, which we covered in episode 22 when we talked about the other Lazarus, that I don't think that would be the case. But if this was the real story, we don't actually know what the original story would have been.
Right.
If it would have had Mary and Martha or just Mary.
So, okay. Well, first of all, I think that if people don't realize that a lot of changes have happened to these stories throughout the years, that's just kind of like a ignorant thing to think. Yeah. Right. I mean, even stories that are non-biblical that have gone through time have changed. It's a telephone game, right? Right. I mean, children play this game and teachers teach this game to show children, like, as it gets passed down from person to person, things get changed. And sometimes it's accidental and sometimes it's because they prefer it to be told that way. Right. I understand what they're saying. So this question is going to sound like I don't, but because they start talking about Mary Magdalene. So are they saying that they think this wasn't even was Mary Magdalene Lazarus' sister, or do they think Mary Magdalene was just the character and then they changed it to be Mary, his sister? I think they're kind of saying that, so they talk about without Martha being in the story, we get a much more complete version of Mary as a character where there's Mary early on in John's gospel, Mary at this point in John's gospel, and Mary also will show up again. Mary Magdalene will also show up again at the crucifixion. Yep. Right. So, and she's a much more prominent figure when you don't have Martha in there, really, to kind of muddy this up. Like, in fact, he also points out there's the line we talked about where Martha says, I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. That's supposed to be Mary in some of these versions. But in the one that ended up making it as canon, there's it's Martha saying this. Well, and that it's it's funny because if you think about it, really, it makes sense, especially when you think about her anointing, not at the crucifixion or washing his feet or whatever she did there, doing it at the house. And then you get that whole thrown in subplot of Martha being mad because she was doing all the work and Mary was just lounging about anointing Jesus's feet. Right. And it's like you could take that out and the story wouldn't change. Not really. Yeah. I mean, it just seems like they had to make sure that Martha still appeared
Right.
in that
Well,
story.
that's the thing is they think, and Andrew does point this out in this video, that there's a really good chance that story, which was written well before
Mhm.
John's story was written, that was the inspiration for them.
Ah.
Like that. So we don't know what the original writer of John wrote, if the original writer of John just had Mary in there, or if they did Mary and Martha. It could have been that some other version that had been written after John had wrote a version that had Martha incorporated into it too. Like, we just don't know.
Right.
But likely somehow that story of Mary and Martha had an influence on this story, where like all of a sudden Martha shows up.
Gotcha.
Because they're tying those together with
Right.
this. But, you get a much more complete picture of Mary, though, when you tie all of them together.
And you replace Martha with Mary.
Yeah.
Other than like the stuff they added where like Martha went and got Mary.
Right.
Because you couldn't be like, Mary went and got Mary.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that's the stuff that where, like, by that point, the scribe would have just switched to the version of the story that has both of them.
Yep.
But early on, at first, he was like, I'm just going to do the one with Mary.
Which is why they were.
I'm not going to do that
That's
one.
why Martha was there, Mary was at the house.
Yeah.
Instead of them both being there together.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
So, this is the stuff where I'm like, all right, so if God is perfect and the Bible is the word of God, his message to all of us here on earth, shouldn't the Bible be perfect?
Well,
and how could the Bible not be perfect?
Isn't the argument that
God?
like the red letters are the ones that are supposed to be perfect and everything else is man-based?
Like, that's not what people actually think, though. Like, people think the entire Bible is perfect.
Really? I know.
Yeah.
But like, really?
Yeah.
How
Evangelicals.
Can you? How can you? Because even so, if you get rid of these parts, the Gospels, right? There's way more to the Bible that everyone knows was written later, wasn't written during the time of Jesus, and was written by men, fucking just people. We're to believe that they were writing using the Holy Spirit. Is that the idea? So that's why it's perfect?
Actually, yeah.
Okay.
Basically. That it's influenced by God, and God would not allow anything into the Bible that was not perfectly what he wanted.
Oh, he's a very good publisher.
I guess so.
He has some great editors.
Yeah. But then you have this issue of like, well, then what the fuck was the story supposed to be?
Right.
And we don't actually know what it was supposed to be. We don't actually know what happened. You can say that it's perfect and it must be what really happened because that's what made it in there.
Mm-hmm.
But then you run into stuff where it's like, okay, but which, version of Joseph's genealogy was right.
Right.
And it's like, there's a bunch of contradictions also in the Bible too, but. Then we get the follow-up to the story of Lazarus, which is the plot to kill Jesus.
Okay.
So this is John 11:45 through 57. Some of the Jews who came to visit Mary believed Jesus after all of this, but some went and told the Pharisees about it. And then those Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin, which was like kind of like a council.
Pentaverate.
Yeah. Which just dropped on Netflix. It was kind of like their legal kind of Congress or a Senate. It's all Pharisees and Sadducees and other political groups. They think that if they let Jesus keep going like this, Romans are going to take away the temple and their nation from them. So they decide to kill him to protect Israel.
Okay.
All right. Even though they are already looking for a way to kill him this whole time, they are only now beginning to
make a plot
to do it. Yeah. And we get this quote, therefore, Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the people of Judea. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples, which we've kind of heard before him. But that was because like crowds were always like coming up to him and stuff like that. So he would go off to the wilderness.
Yes. Yeah.
They give orders that if anyone knows where Jesus is, they need to report it. And then we get to the story of the anointing of Bethany, which we covered in episode 16, Mary and her nards. if you want to hear about that. The reason why we covered it so far back is because in Luke, whose timeline we're following, it happens way earlier.
Right. Well, so he withdrew to Ephraim.
Yeah, that's the name of the
But
village.
then there's an anointing at Bethany. So he came back to Bethany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
though he's trying to hide.
For dinner with Lazarus.
For the person that he brought back to life and the reason why everyone all of a sudden wants to kill him.
He's not exactly keeping it low key.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know. I think even in today's time, if somebody legitimately resurrected somebody else.
Yeah.
I don't think the first answer would be let's kill him. It might be a second answer.
Right. Yeah.
in these days, but literally they hear that he brought somebody back to life and they were like, we can't have him keep doing this. The Romans are going to take away Israel because Jesus is magic. Is that why?
Yeah.
The Romans would take away Israel from the Israelites?
Because he's stirring people up, I guess.
I mean, he brought somebody back to life, though.
Yeah.
If that were a real thing that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everyone in the world would kind of be like, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah. It's
why would
that's the biggest giveaway that this is all nonsense.
Right. The Emperor of Rome.
Yeah.
Emperors of Rome, known to be very egocentric, would have gone and gotten Jesus and been like, well, you work for me now.
Yeah, you're raising people I want you to.
Yes, exactly. So I don't know, the fact that they're going to take Israel away from us, I don't know that would have occurred. I think they would have just went and got Jesus.
Right.
And taken, and that could have been a whole fun story.
Yeah.
Where he goes and he doesn't do what they want him to and all kinds of
it
fun stuff.
Good. Yeah.
Interest in my head now. I'm running that
adventures.
I'm running that plot in my head.
Yeah.
And then maybe I'll write another book of the Bible.
Yeah.
An alternate
book
timeline.
Of Lindsay.
Yes. Where instead of being killed because they were worried about the Romans taking away Israel, they just took Jesus and there was this whole thing that went on with that.
Just randomly gender swap Jesus.
Oh, yeah, of course. You have to.
Yeah.
It makes way more sense if you turn him into a female. The whole
Jesus.
thing. Jesse. Come on now.
Yeah. And then we get to the Palm Sunday Redux. So it's John 12 through 19. So we talked about this in the last episode with Palm Sunday. This is John's version of it. When people hear Jesus is coming for the Passover festival, they grab palm branches.
Oh, they actually say it in this one?
This one, it's palm branches.
Okay.
Yeah. And they go out to meet him. They're shouting, Hosanna, blessed is the King of Israel, and all that stuff. Jesus finds a young donkey to sit on.
Cool. Just a random donkey.
Yeah. And then they quote that prophecy, which you probably remembered, basically that he was going to be riding a donkey and its colt.
Yes.
But they changed it to just be a donkey's colt.
Oh.
So, yeah,
well, it makes more sense. It's amazing what you can change when you have the time to read the source material and then make changes because they were bad writers.
Yeah. And it assumes, so whoever wrote John originally or wrote this part of John, they assumed nobody was going back to actually check.
Right. Little did they know they were all going to be in the same book someday.
Yeah, no kidding. And then the writer of John talks about how the word of him raising Lazarus is spreading and Pharisees see that everyone is loving him. Then we get the thing, we actually covered this previously before as well, where Jesus says, Father, glorify your name. And a booming voice comes from the sky saying, I have glorified it and will glorify it again. John talks about how some Jewish people are coming around and others aren't. And we get this quote, yet at the same time, many, even among the leaders, believed in him. But because of the Pharisees, they would not openly acknowledge their faith for fear that they would be put out of the synagogue. For they loved human praise more than the praise of God.
Just another chocked full episode of Bible inconsistencies and bad editing and inconsistencies and Did I already say inconsistencies? Did I say that twice?
Yeah, but it's also full of redundancies, so that's cool.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And a whole lot of like, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't wrap my head around people reading this book and still being like, yeah, this is what I believe.
Right.
Like, I get it. There are tons of people who do.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they are seeing something I'm not seeing. They are seeing something that I'm not seeing. I think that is the point, right?
Yeah. Or they're seeing something that's not there.
Right. I think that one of the possibilities of going through the Bible on this podcast would be that perhaps I'll understand and maybe even myself start buying into the idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
But honestly, the more we go through it, the more I'm like, oh my God, I am so right.
Yeah. No, I know.
Which is terrible. And, like in a way where like, I believe what I believe even
Right.
more strongly now. Not like shitting on it, what everybody else believes. But
Right. If it works for you to be a better person, then great. I
Yes.
just don't understand how.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
it doesn't
that's-
work for
that's-
us.
That's what it is. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, great. It's faith.
Yeah.
Fine. That's the easy answer. I get into this whole hyperbolic thing where it's like, okay, so we're reading it. So I'm I'm learning about it, which makes me even more like, this is bullshit. How can people believe this? And then we learn why people believe it. And then like, it's just this big circle where instead of me understanding and buying into the stories
Mhm.
and seeing what people see in it, I'm just like, have you read the Bible?
Right.
Because
yeah.
if you're reading the Bible in the way that we're going through it,
Yeah.
how can you?
Right. And I honestly don't
How can
think
you maintain?
I honestly don't think a lot of like everyday Christians, like your average person that you see around
Right.
who identifies as Christian, I honestly don't think they're reading the Bible that much. Like they probably try to,
Sure.
quote unquote,
It's really boring.
and everything. It is really boring,
so
and it's really
boring.
tough to and feel like we've said this before, how you get trained to think that if you don't understand something, it's on you.
Right.
It's your fault if you don't understand something. It's not that there's something wrong with the Bible, because the Bible's perfect.
Right.
So if you don't understand something, it's because it's on you. And that's like demoralizing when you end up trying to read this stuff and try to understand it. Also, let's point out, most of the so-called teachings of Jesus is just about being that you should be a Christian.
Right.
It's not about what it means to be a Christian.
Right.
Like, you've got the Sermon on the Mount that kind of goes into some of the philosophy of be a good person, be meek, be broke, be poor,
Right.
and stuff like that. But like, you don't really get much in the way of a philosophy, and they certainly don't tell you how to be
Right.
the stuff. It tells you to be this stuff, but not like, how do you get yourself to the point of not being that way?
Right.
Of not being
It's
greedy
not
and
instructional.
stuff. No, it's just rules, really.
Right.
So yeah, it when you do sit down and read it, like, there's not much to glean from it. So why would you read that much about
Right.
it?
So then you lean on the experts,
So-called, yeah.
air quotes, which you can't hear. That's an air quote.
We're just gonna start using it. Yeah, you invented that.
Prove it otherwise. No, I lost my train of thought. Oh, the so-called experts, priests,
Yeah.
and
Pastors.
the fucking
Yeah.
Pope, up to the Pope, and
Yeah.
all these people who are supposed to have like the knowledge of this stuff,
Yeah.
telling you what to believe. So, because they know people aren't putting in that work, a lot
Right.
of them. So you just believe what they tell you.
Yeah. And they end up cherry picking just
Of course.
to get to the point they're trying to make.
Right.
So a bunch of people don't see, like, oh, but the Bible also says the opposite.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, so next time on BSFA, we're getting into the Passion story.
Okay.
So we're going to probably at least cover the Last Supper. I don't know what else we're going to get into, but we'll at least get to that. So,
Right on.
I wanted to thank one more time Andrew Mark Henry for letting us use clips from his video. You can find his channel Religion for Breakfast on YouTube.
I asked him if you could use his clips on our
Yeah,
podcast.
I asked
and he
him.
said yes.
Yeah, we got permission.
Good job, babe.
Yeah, that's why I was working so much on this yesterday. That's why this is like 5 hours of work yesterday was for this episode.
I'm sure you're going to cut this part out because, I mean, who cares? But like, that's good. And I'm glad you did it the right way instead of just stealing somebody's content.
Oh yeah, I mean, and
like the Bible does.
yeah, yeah. What's funny though is we had one of our disciples on Twitter saw that I sent him a message. He responded saying, "Hey, you can use it for fair use."
Oh, fair, because it's out there on YouTube and public.
Not only that, but because it's commentary,
right?
And he was like, because you guys aren't monetizing your podcast, and unfortunately,
I know, right?
I don't know what he's talking about. We have ads every episode.
We're very Jesus-like in that aspect.
Yeah. But you guys are monetizing the podcast, and also, which I don't think you need to be non-monetized, but that helps.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I still reached out to him, and the guy got back to us pretty quick and said he was totally fine with it. So that's highly appreciated.
Yes. Awesome. Thanks.
And they all lived miserably ever after. Thank you so much for checking out our podcast. Help us share the good news by sending this to a friend or leaving a review to help others find us. Follow the show on Twitter @BibleAtheists, and we'll talk to you next time. It's science. See, I was raised to not believe in science.
That's true. So you just thought cake had yeast in it.
Yeah.
Because bubbles.
Because Jesus.
So like pop has yeast in it too then, or?
Yeah, pop is bread, right?